Thank you very much. Okay. As we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Idaho Partners for Good. Our mission is to reinvent how people like you and me give, share our expertise, and do greater good together. Our mission is to develop stronger, healthier, better equipped nonprofits so that they can do more what they do best. We do that by educating donors to give more for more impact and providing nonprofits with education, coaching, mentoring, evaluation, accountability, and capacity building expertise. We have 3 core values: continual learning, designing with end users, and using entrepreneurial mindsets. The experts we put in front of you are best in class and are constantly learning, retooling, and innovating to stay ahead of changing times. It's one of the reasons why we record these so that those you know can access best in class information and you're able to share it afterwards. Now to today's workshop. Last year, we heard a lot of stories, both executive directors and board members, about their level of anxiety and confusion in regard to their organization in a post-pandemic world. What are you to do when the operating environment has changed? Donations are down and your board of directors are left wondering how to help. You learn from the Nonprofit Success Lab. The Nonprofit Success Lab is a place to learn and ask questions in a supportive environment with a host of nonprofit experts to resource you. Today, you'll learn from Maureen O'Toole, who is addressing the 3 key work areas of the board. This week is week 1, and she will address the issues of the board best practices. Maureen O'Toole's passion is helping people and organizations use their gifts, talents, goals, and strategies to become the best version of themselves. With 30 years of servant leadership in military service, higher education, elementary education, and youth leadership, for-profit and non-for-profit organizations, she moves easily between business and the nonprofit sectors. Former Silver Sage Girl Scout CEO, and she is the current president of the Sunrise Rotary Foundation. Maureen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. And I usually like it to be really interactive. So if you have a question, raise your hand, just interrupt me. And then I do put a lot of humor in what I do, because one of the things at a psychological level, when you laugh, you actually better engage in the conversation. So you're going to see a funny poll happen here. So I'm going to get started. I'll share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Wonderful. Okay, from the beginning. Okay, so today, last time when we met, we had a great conversation about what are the 3 duties of a board. And we talked about the duty of obedience, loyalty, and care. And all of those things are pretty important. You have to be obedient to the mission of the organization. And once the organization makes a decision, you have to support it. You have to make sure you put the welfare of the organization above your own welfare as a board member. So it's always about something that's bigger than you. So that's really the mindset of a board member. I tell people all the time, it's a non-paid position. It's a job, it's a non-paid job. So part of what's important is for people to understand, well, what am I supposed to be doing if this is a job? So I'm going to pick it up from where we were last week about the 3 duties of a board to obedience, care, and loyalty. And I'm going to move into what are the 3 work areas of the board? What am I supposed to be doing? And in my experience, a lot of board members just get somebody ask you to be on the board and you're honored and you care about what their mission is and you say yes. And then you don't get a whole lot of onboarding and training about what am I supposed to be doing. So people spend the first 6 months or so, even up to a year in a 2 or 3 year term going, I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. So one thing I did get in the Girl Scouts program is Girl Scouts of the USA did a fantastic job working with board chairs. And they would say, okay, here's the role of the board very specifically. So board chairs felt supported. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. They could go back to their boards and really create a functional board. So I was the benefit of that because I had 3 board chairs in a row and I got to sit in on some of that training. So a lot of what you're going to be hearing me talk about, I actually learned from Girl Scouts of the USA, and it's based on the McKinsey program. And it's incredibly useful and it's really specific. So as I go through it, the purpose of board members are like always wondering, well, why am I here? what am I supposed to be doing? I'm glad I'm here. I don't know exactly what you want me to do. So then I just dive very directly into that, because when a board member understands what their role is, that's their purpose. And then they can step into it. So why do boards exist? And I'm going to circle back to this one. I think it's pretty powerful. Boards have a fiduciary responsibility. And Blossom talked about that last time. The requirement to act in the best interest of the nonprofit. And then that middle one, and you're bound to legal and ethical obligations, and those are tied to those 3 duties I just talked about. But that middle one, responsible for managing the organizational interest. And that includes the people want to think about the finances, because the word fiduciary makes you think about money, but it's the whole organization in itself, the interests and the assets of the organization. Boards have responsibility for paying attention to all of those things. The organization as a whole, it's holistic approach. And it's helpful for the staff to have that, because board members bring a lot of expertise that staff members may not have, and knowledge and a different perspective. And it creates a level of objectivity. Somebody who can step back and look at the whole organization. So you're not working in it all the time. You have a level of objectivity. So really the fiduciary responsibility is what a board always has. So I just did an overview of that. Are there any questions on that? Okay. So why do boards exist? It's protecting the organization's assets from the misuse of power. And that could be from inside the staff. So you could have a staff who's engaged in what we would call a conflict of interest, or they're using company property for their own benefit, or they're hiring friends and family who may not be the best fit for the job. Or it could actually come from board members. And I've personally experienced this one twice. We had a board member who was trying to engage in business with inside the organization. That's okay as long as you disclose it and the board members are aware of it and you don't vote on it. But twice I had board members just kind of step in there and try to get a business partner going out of this organization. You have to be really careful on those kind of things. That's the second one, conflict of interest. And then the other is greater transparency and accountability. There are people outside the organization who know what's going on. They have access to the financials. They have an overview of what's going on in operations and what's going on with equipment and what's going on with property. There's a greater level of transparency about what the organization is doing and how it's operating. And the last one's just so powerful. Promote a higher level of professionalism from the organizational leaders. If you have a really talented board, and I'm working with one right now that has people who are experts in accounting and property and law, they are just a wealth of knowledge for you. You know, you get them pulled into committees, you get them pulled in, you have questions. Can we ask you to help us on this problem we're solving? And especially I've had the experience before where I had to pull in a board member because we had legal issues. And I need somebody to help me understand what are the parameters and what is the specific language. And then working with kids, and I'm sure Liberty understands this one, and so does Devin. You've had an incident where one of the children was injured on our property and had to be life flighted. They broke their leg. You know, and I had to call the board chair right away and say, this is what's happening, and then help us craft the message, and who tells the message to the press, who does that. And it was just a super healthy conversation. This news is going to go out. Board members know it needs to go out. I could use some help crafting this conversation. So they bring a lot of capacity building for you. So here's the big question. But okay, that's great, Maureen. That's great. But what exactly are they supposed to be doing? And that's where the power of actually identifying specific tasks becomes so useful. And once board members know, here's the 3 areas of work, and here's really specific tasks inside each one, then they'll focus on true board level work and capacity building at the board level. So I was trying to figure out, you know, what am I supposed to be doing? And you're supposed to be leading, right? But that's a nice, big, nebulous term. You know, what is that? I'm supposed to be a leader. What does that mean? So I thought about that, and how do I take that as a leadership role and turn it into a really simple acronym that captures what that means? So the next one is, what does that actually mean? So board members lead. They listen. They listen to stakeholders. They listen to the staff. They listen to the people we serve. They listen to each other. They listen. And they evaluate what's going on in the organization. They evaluate what best practices could be implemented here. They evaluate where money could be spent to build capacity. They evaluate how to move forward and do strategic planning and have a vision for the organization. There's a lot of brain power going on there. Advise. They're a source of advice to the CEO. They're a source of advice to the staff through the committees they serve on. So they do a lot of advising. And the last one is they direct. Once the strategic plan is approved, they go, okay, your job now, we've approved your strategic plan. We helped you build it. Your job is to go out and actually do this. And then we're going to make sure you're doing it. And then when there needs to be a board intervention for whatever reason, they have the ability and the authority to make certain requirements and direct activity. So that is an essential listen, evaluate what's going on, advise, and then give directions. So pretty straightforward. So once again, you're going, okay, Maureen, that's awesome. What does that actually mean? What am I supposed to be doing specifically in between at board meetings and in between board meetings? So here it is. There are 3 work areas of a board. And I look at it, I'm going to go look at each one in depth, but a big one is shape the mission, the strategic direction. What is the mission of the organization? Is it changing? Does it need to be readdressed? Is it staying the same? What is the mission? And then what direction are we going in? What is our big picture for what success looks like and what we want to accomplish? That's a big category. Another big category is ensure leadership and have resources. So one of my friends said that the job of the board, he's the president of the organization. He said the job of the board is to hire me and fire me. Right? And make sure you have a good leader. And if they're not doing a good job, you learn to let them go. Make sure there's finances to support the organization. There's the resources. Make sure you have sufficient staff. There's resources. Make sure you give leadership advice and guidance. And the last one, the big picture, monitor and improve performance. Is the organization doing what they said they were going to do? Do they actually have an annual plan? Do they actually have a strategic plan? Are there processes in place to evaluate how we're doing? Those are the 3 big work areas of a board. And underneath those, there are specific tasks. So when you look at that, you might go, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. And it is, but that's why you usually have a lot of other people to help you do the work. And I will give you very specific examples of all of those things. So we've got strategy and mission for leadership and resources, monitor and improve performance. And that dog over there shows somebody trying to balance all sorts of things simultaneously. Here's all the 3 big things I need to be paying attention to. Underneath those categories, we're going to have all these little tasks I'm supposed to be doing. Like I said, it's a job. It's an unpaid job. So, and it's one of those unpaid jobs that you do because your heart's in it. So the big question would be like, okay, what if you're new to a board? You've never had experience in these kind of areas. Like, what if I don't know how to do all these things? You know, am I going to be useful? Should I be on this board? What if I don't know how to do all these things? And that's a level of discomfort I think a lot of board members have. Well, you know, I don't have a background in law. I don't have a background in property management. I don't have a background in performance evaluation. I don't have that. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. You've got a lot of people around you who will have those experiences. And we'll talk about this one later, but that's the power. We need people with talents in these areas when we're talking to potential board members. So what if I don't have talent in those areas? So this is where I turn into something humorous. So it is Girl Scout cookie time, right? And there are practically 9 different Girl Scout cookie flavors, right? There are about 9 of them. And Girl Scouts is a program actually to give girls leadership experiences and opportunities. That's what it is. That's what it does. The whole can help become strong leaders. So if you're sitting on a board, and I'm on a board right now, and Trisha just joined a board, and Devin has a board, and he's on the board as an ex officio member, and we've got well, gosh, we've got the Idaho Partners for Good we've got their board members in this conversation. Devin's leading the organization and he's a non-voting member of his board, right? So the question is step back and go, what if I don't know how to do all those kind of things? Or what do I bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? So I'm going to caveat this. This is a fun survey. So don't worry if you get your cookie type, you go, well, I'm not really sure. It's a fun survey. And I had one lady one time, she goes, at the end of the survey, she said, I'm not a tag along. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If you want to be a Thin Mint, that's not how it turns out, go get Thin Mints. Okay. So here's your first question. What best describes your style? So take about 30 seconds and don't overthink it. And which one of those 5 best describes you? That includes your cat, Bethany. Have your cat take it.
Yes.
Okay, everybody got that one done? I can only see about 4 of us. Okay. And then Blossom said as we were starting, what was the word you used, Blossom? Bohemian?
Yeah, I'm a bohemian.
And I would roll it under D. D is the bohemian. Or no, actually it's B. It's B. Okay. And your next question, if you were at a party, which of these would you probably be engaging in? All right, Trisha just got a big smile on her face.
Always in the kitchen.
Okay. Next question. In high school, what would you have most likely been engaged in? Okay. Question 4. What kind of vehicle would you pick? And the last question. This one's a little tougher. If you had to describe yourself or your best friend in one word, which one would you pick? Okay, so now we're going to tally up your letters. And the next ones are just a description of the leadership style of these personalities. So the first one, you're answering mostly A's, you're a Thin Mint. You're well-rounded, well-liked, socially adept, well-spoken. You're a great blend of ideas. And when you look at this is the #1 selling cookie in the United States, is the Thin Mint. It's a classic thing, right? It's not overstated. It's not understated. It's interesting flavor-wise. It's got chocolate and graham cracker and mint. You know, it's got a lot of things going on, but it's not overwhelming. It's just very timeless. And I really like that last sentence. You lead from a place of higher order thinking, collaboration, consensus, problem solving. You engage people in conversation, you invite them into it, you listen, you evaluate. And board members, we ask board members to do high order thinking, to do the collaboration, to do the problem solving. Has to happen at the staff level too, but we need their brains. If you're a B, here we go. This one goes by a couple, I think on the East Coast, this is called the caramel cluster. So interestingly enough, the Samoa is the most bought cookie by men, and the Thin Mint is the most purchased cookie by women. And the Samoa actually has a nickname that I actually heard in an interview with athletes. And one guy said, yeah, it was football players. They interviewed a football team about what's your favorite Girl Scout cookie. And this one guy goes, these things, we call these the crack cookies. Because you open up a sleeve of them and you look down a couple of minutes later and the whole thing's gone. You're like, whoa, what just happened? So I bet some of you fall into this category. Man, you're adventurous. You don't mind risk. You're willing to take risk. And you're just willing to be out there and try new things and do new things. And you're You're fine with other people who have a tremendous amount of creativity. You bring that to the table, and we absolutely need that. We need the creative thinkers. Okay, here you go. If you're a tag along, you're just that go-to person. You're like the dependable all the time. Everybody knows you're always going to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're out there helping people all the time. People want to have you around. People find you the type person you just want to have them around. People feel like when you're there, like it's going to all happen. It's going to be organized. I'm going to get a voice. So we have any tag-alongs? Okay, did we have any Samoas?
I'm a mix of B and C.
Okay. Okay, what about any thin mints? Okay. Next one, the lemon cookie. And I like the positive definition here. It's simple, it's direct, but it still has brightness to it. You're one of those people who just is able to bring the bright energy with you. You can be counted on to do that long term, especially that duty of care and fiduciary responsibility. Think long term, and you think about how what you do affects the people and affects the environment. You're community aware, you're globally aware. You're always focused on, is this value-based behavior? Okay, anybody a lemon cookie?
John,
No?
didn't you do a lot of D's?
I was more D's, yes, sorry.
Okay.
Being English, this is somewhat difficult to do, being reflective about one's character and making it public. We are stiff upper lip and all that. Keep it inside.
Okay.
But I appreciate it does raise some thoughts.
Okay. And here's the last one. Here we go. Whoops. Last one. Trefoil. Trefoil's that shortbread cookie. Very simple, very direct. I like to dip it in coffee. You know, you just get things done. You don't draw attention to yourself. You're direct with people, but you're always respectful. You get right down to business. Absolutely avoid drama. Avoid sidebar conversations. Your goal is to create an area of simplicity, clarity. What's going on? What do we need to do next? Anybody? So I'm a trefoil, a trefoil. Yeah, my goal is always, how do we create simplicity? How do we create clarity? Which is why I think having Idaho Partners for Good give these sessions is so powerful. Let's just bring out on the table what people are concerned about. And let's talk about it. And let's do some simple training on it. Anybody else at trefoil?
That would be me. Yeah.
So we got Kimbra. Who else was that?
I was.
And
Bethany? Wow, that's 4 of us. Hey, Devin, I didn't hear you. Which one are you, Devin?
Definitely Camille, I think.
Which one?
Camilla, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can,
If you can use chat, Devin, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Okay, who did I forget? Gem friends.
I'm a split between C and E.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And I just put that as an interesting way to start this, because you don't have to know everything. You don't have to think the way other people think. The board needs your talents. They need the diversity of talent. It's just a fun way to do it. So now we're going to roll into what, Maureen, hey, could you just get to the point? Could you drive to the point? What exactly am I supposed to do as a board member? So I'm going to go through those 3 areas with just some pretty specific activities that typically fall under those. And when we're done here, I gave Bethany and Blossom a thorough list. What are the activities that fall under each of those? So they can just send it out to you as a Word doc. And you can use that with your board. Here are the 3 areas of board work, and here's activities that fall under each one. And I've done a lot of work with boards recently where 2 in particular who the board said, well, we actually set a goal to have board level training, regular board level training. And one actually had written in their bylaws that the board would conduct an annual self-assessment. And identifying what the actual activities are rolls itself nicely into the board doing a self-assessment. Do we know what we're supposed to be doing, and are we executing in those areas? So that's why I think it's important to just give you the handout. Here's what we talked about, and here's what it turns into in actual tasks. Because one of the ones we're also going to do is board evaluation. And some of the board evaluation tools I built are based on the 3 areas of work of the board. Do we know what they are, and are we acting in them? So the bylaws actually address the legal duties and responsibilities of the organization, collaborate, provide guidance and oversight. Usually your bylaws will actually identify some specific activities as well. So you'll get them from me. Here's some lists, but that's somewhere else I would go to. Look at what do your bylaws say. Do they identify specific activities of the board? So it's interesting. Like I said, one I just worked with actually had written in their bylaws, they will conduct annual performance assessments on the board. So, and the organization I'm working with right now wants put in their strategic plan that the board will get onboarding and they will get professional development and they will do an assessment. They want that in the strategic plan. So there might be other sources of where your board activities come from. So this is the first one here. So this is falling under strategic mission and vision. We know what are some specific activities under that big work area. So this one's always open to conversation, but adopt and regularly review the organization's mission, vision, and value station. So the staff has to protect the organization's mission. So having a regular, understand what it is and regularly review it at the board level and use that when you're evaluating the activities of the board. Here's what our mission is. Are we conducting that mission? Are we having the impact we said we were going to have? A mission statement says, what do we do simply? Are we doing what our mission statement says we do? So it becomes a way to just do a regular check. And then let's say that the mission might change. You might actually end up picking up, you're working with this organization or you're working with this group of people and you realize they have these other needs that you could meet, but it falls outside your current mission statement. So the board has the oversight of, is there going to be a change to the mission statement? And if so, why? Because a significant change to the mission statement actually needs to be reported to the IRS. And another one is the vision. The vision statement is, what does success look like if we get there? Is our big vision for success? Will we reduce homelessness in the Treasure Valley? Will we provide housing for people who are in transition? And what does good look like when we achieve it? So if I go back to the biblical principle, without a vision, the people perish. So we know what we do. That's the mission. The vision is, what does it look like if we succeed? What is our impact if we succeed? And that has to be clear so everybody involved says, this is what we want to accomplish by doing the mission. And the last one is a value statement. All organizations have values, all of them. All of them. How do we choose to behave as an organization? How do we choose to act? And are we aligned with it? Is the behavior of the board, is the behavior of the staff aligned with our organizational values? So in the military, it was loyalty, duty, respect, selfless server, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And we wore it on our dog tags. It was a constant reminder that we are called to live in accordance with those values. And it's a big role for the board to say, we always have to make sure we and the whole organization operate within our stated values. Next one, and please interrupt me if you have questions on these. This one is something that goes back and forth. Some organizations have the board do the strategic plan. Some organization has the staff. The board's role is primarily to ensure that the strategic plan is aligned with the mission, vision, organizational values, and it has a logical approach to doing what we're going to do. That's it. The staff, so in a way, the board will own reviewing the mission, ensuring the vision still fits, ensuring our values are reflected in how we choose to conduct ourselves and what we're going to be doing. But actually figuring out the specific steps, the how we're going to do this, the tactics and the strategies is more of a staff level responsibility with input and approval by the board. So that makes the strategic planning process a back and forth conversation and a partnership, because there's two different sides to who fundamentally owns what. Certainly that the staff is going to be participating. Let's review the vision. Let's review the mission. Let's review the value statements. So there's both sides engaged in this. They both have a role in it. And it's important to be clear on that. Who's doing what when you're doing strategic planning. And if an organization is in distress, the board might actually be right in the middle of strategic planning. It's not that they can't be there. If it's a healthy organization, they're going to be more staying in their lane. And the last one, once everything works their way through it, the strategic planning process is done, the board approves the strategic plan. And if a strategic plan is drilled down further into annual plans, like the level of detail, this is exactly what we're doing this year by quarter. Here's the goals, here's who owns it, all those kind of things. They approve the strategic and annual plans. And any changes to it, because the environment changes internally and external. If something happens and the organization has to redirect, that comes to the board's attention and they approve, we're going to redirect. We're going to have a significant change to what we thought we were going to do. And the last one, this one's so powerful. Ensure that the board has bylaws and policies. So people often don't understand the bylaws. They're legal documents. If you can think of it in this term, it's a legal contract between the board and the IRS that says how the board is going to act, how the board is going to behave. And it identifies the purpose of the organization and then how the board is going to direct itself and how it's going to be organized. How many board members? What specific responsibilities do they have? What are their limitations of authority? How often do we meet? How do we meet? But make sure the organization has bylaws that the board understands and looks at on a regular basis. Because that's a big problem if you have board members who are sitting in a meeting and go, well, I don't know what the bylaws say. The bylaws should be at every single meeting. They should get training on it. And the last one is the board policies. Does the board have policies that direct specific things that should always happen? And the IRS requires nonprofits to have 2 specific ones. You can have more than that, and your bylaws usually identify, you know, here's some policies we want to have. But one is the whistleblower policy, and the other is document retention and destruction policy at a minimum. And that all came out of Sarbanes-Oxley. You don't want people shredding things right before an audit starts. Like that kind of destroys transparency and integrity. So part of their role in strategy and mission is making sure we have bylaws, we know what they say, and we have the policies we should have. Any questions on that one?
Trisha had another comment in the chat that is awesome. It's kind of the outlier for what most nonprofits that we've worked with are doing. So awesome. Yay.
Okay.
Yeah, it was my first one, so it kind of sounds like they do this regularly, but they had a lawyer come in who had reviewed extensively the bylaws and talked about, you know, responsibilities of the board. We went kind of line by line through the bylaws, asked questions, got answers, and then we'll vote to approve any changes or amendments at the next meeting.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I take, every time I go to a board meeting, I have the bylaws right next to me. So if anybody says, well, what does the bylaws say? I have almost an encyclopedic memory. I'll go, it's page 4, section 3A. This is what it says. This is what we said we were going to do. This is what we're going to do. So I can't see the top. Would somebody tell me what this one says? Because the screen share thing, I can't see the top of this one. That we want to ensure leadership and resources, or?
Yep.
Okay. So I put this one in here because board members often don't think of themselves this way. They are ambassadors for the organization in the community. And that, how is that tied to ensuring leadership and resources? When you're out, you're a board member and you're out in the community talking about the organization and its impact, you are drawing people to the organization. When you're passionate about it, you're drawing them just by how you're representing yourself and how you represent in the organization. You might be speak at an event. You might show up at a Rotary Club when there's a presentation on your organization going on. And I know we've seen Liberty at a number of our Sunrise Rotary Clubs. But board members are huge ambassadors for the organization. It's huge. and it draws people, it draws donors, it draws people to come to your events. And this one is so powerful. Serve on a board committee. Typically, your bylaws will identify which committees you should have. And it'll list one or two. You should have like an audit and finance committee. You should have, there's different terms for this, like a board development committee, a part of the board that helps recruit board members. And you might have, here's the third one I see most of the time, is have an executive committee. An executive committee works directly with the CEO if there's problems, to give them feedback, to give them a performance evaluation. But that level, that is a capacity building for the organization. So that's tied directly to leadership and resources. You are stepping in a leadership role when you serve on a board committee. We're going to tackle this for the organization. We're going to talk about fundraising. We're going to talk about next year's budget. We're going to talk about these things. It's a real capacity builder. They bring their brain power to you, their problem solving abilities to you. And the last one is really, you can see how easily this one is tied to both leadership and resources. Ensure that the staff has sufficient resources to do their jobs. Do they have the financial resources? Do they have enough people? Do they have the talent to do the mission? Do they have the resources to execute the mission successfully and turn it into and make the vision come real? Do they have what they need, the capacity, the financial support? And then sometimes this one is really interesting to think about, the emotional support for the staff. At a minimum, do we provide feedback to the CEO? Does the CEO have a place, or the executive director have a place where they can come and problem solve with me, or just say, hey, I need some support. This is hard right now. Somebody asked me at a board meeting I was doing some training. Well, what about that one? You know, can we do nice things for the staff? Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, that's tied to leadership and resources. You become a source of emotional support and feedback. I said, yeah, buy them pizza, send them thank you cards. You know, that's all powerful things. They're little things that really build capacity at the emotional level. Any questions on this one? Devin, Liberty, John?
No questions. All
Okay.
great information.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
And-
just chime in? I'm going to chime in for just a minute. So,
Okay.
Trisha in particular, because you are on the board and you may be coming up to this, Maureen, but really part of what is a huge gap in the nonprofit sector is once board members are trained, they tend to be the accountability part of the organization, but they also need to have that care for the CEO and the executive director and the executive team. And
Yeah.
so it is a super important, it's a critical thing to not only hold your executive director accountable for the organization, but also to resource and support and inspire and encourage them so that they can keep going, because oftentimes it is a very, very thankless job with leaders wearing multiple hats that oftentimes are ill-fitting, but they have to wear it anyway.
Yeah. I agree with that. I call that the care and keeping of the CEO. That is, you know, you take care of your leaders and that helps them take care of the job in front of them. People, and here's the one, when we talk about ensure leadership and resources, a lot of board members want to always be thinking about the funding side of this. And that's a huge role. Ensure that whatever funding plan is brought forward, whatever budget is brought forward, addresses current needs and a long-term strategy. You know, make sure somebody's thinking not about this year, but also 2 to 3 years down the road. Does our budget address that? Do we have sufficient funds in an investment portfolio or in the bank if something should happen? Do we have 3 to 6 months of operating expenses if something should happen? If the roof caves in or something like that. Just think about the financial plan, not just now, but take it forward in time. And that really was never a talent for me until about 10 years ago. I always had in the military, I always had someone who was a finance officer who took care of that. But as the CEO, like I actually have to understand this in like our current plan, so I can work directly with the talent on the board and get their input as to like, well, what else could we do to make sure we have sufficient reserves? What else could we do? This one's important. I just finished a board term with another organization where boards, a good policy to have is make sure that the CEO or executive director has a limited of authority to spend a certain amount of money. Then and above, like say $5,000 or $10,000, that the board has to be aware that this is being considered and they have to approve it. And that one's pretty powerful because twice now I've worked with an organization where the organizational leader was literally writing checks for thousands and thousands of dollars that the board didn't know anything about. So, you know, the board should make sure there's some limit of authority as a policy. Any expense above this has to be approved by the board. I actually worked with one organization that had the limited authority of spending of the staff in the bylaws. So that's an important function. And make sure that board committees, donors, grantors are adequately informed of financial condition of the organization. A lot of nonprofits will put together in their annual report, here's a budget figure. I always recommend you do that and have it on the website, and also put your Form 990 on your website, your tax document on the website. Make sure there's transparency for the board committees, and grantors of the organization's financial condition. Any questions on these? These all three were tied to funding.
Maureen, on that point, one of the things to keep from burdening a board with a lot of purchases, if you know that these are coming up, when the finance committee gets together and the board approves the budget, it could be within the budget. You know, the ED has authority to spend up to what the approved budget. So that kind of eliminates a lot of the back and forth if there's some big purchases coming.
That's a great idea. I haven't seen that before. That's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, and you'll see this, I have the most bullet statements under this one, ensure leadership and resources, because it always comes back to, we want to make sure the organization is sustainable. And part of sustainability is always financial sustainability. Another one is that the organization has audits, that the board makes sure that an independent auditor is selected, someone who's outside the organization, someone who has an objective point of view, and then review the audit reports with the auditor and with the organizational leaders, the CEO or the executive director. Make sure you know what the audit says. Make sure you know what the feedback was, what the management letter says. Make sure if there is any findings that need to be addressed, you know what they are, because then that becomes a directive to the organization. Adhere to these things. Here's the one where I know Devin's probably got had some heartburn with this, getting his board behind this one. It is part of a board member's job to participate in fundraising, period. That's just part of your job. And you know that when you go in. I either give money to the organization, I get money for the organization, or I help them find funders. That's just part of your job. And it can be fun. Some people enjoy it. Some people you just bring along. Here's a simple way for you to step into that, but it is definitely part of your job as a board member. You need to have some financial investment in the organization. And the last one is like my friend Bill says, he's the president of the organization. He said, their job is to hire me, correct me, and fire me. One of major tasks of a board is to hire, praise, support, reward, and if necessary, replace the organizational leader. So they're probably going to be involved in the selection process, the selection committee. That is a huge responsibility. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, Maureen, there is a question that I'm holding in regards to the audit process. As you know, most nonprofits in Idaho have an annual budget of less than $250,000. At what point, I mean, what is a best or promising practice on when you really should have somebody auditing? I know there's federal grants that you have to have an audit to get their grant. But is there some good thinking around when that should start happening?
I'm accustomed to having at least audited financial statements annually. Just here's what we money we had, here's the receipts to prove it, here's what our expenses were. Everything was done in accordance with the limits of authority of the staff to spend money. I'm a big fan of having at least that. And then every couple, 3 to 5 years, have a full organizational audit. That's expensive. I'll just say right up front, a full organizational audit is time consuming. It's a couple of weeks and it's expensive. It's $10,000 to $15,000. But I have always found doing that every couple of years to be very powerful and helpful. But at a minimum, have audited financial statements, have an outside person look at this annually. But that's just my personal preference, but seeing if anybody else wants to weigh in on that one.
Kimberly, you got some thoughts on that one?
No, in my experience, we did try to do at least the annual report and make sure that that was put out in front of a lot of people, and then we have that report validated
Yes.
by not an organization necessarily, but an interested party, but not within our organization. We were able to do that pretty economically. We did not submit to a full audit again because of the size and capacity that we were at. But we did comply to the annual report to make sure that that's very, very public. And that was part of our bylaws. So you will have an annual report, you will have an annual meeting, and then we validated that information, again, just an outside interested party, but not outside of our organization.
Yep. Yeah, even to that point, Kimber, if you have a finance committee with some people who are CPAs on it, they could be the interested party that steps back every year and makes sure everything is square.
Exactly.
Yep. And then when you do that level of fiscal review on a regular basis, you can feel very confident that you're being transparent about your funding.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to actually move on to a couple ones because there's one more area after this, but organizational overseas succession planning. If you have an executive director who's going to be moving on, going to be retiring, that is once again, because one of their primary duties is selecting the organizational leader. That is a board role, oversee that succession planning. Serve on a board yourself and help find people to join boards. People who have talent for whatever that focus of that committee is. This one I've never seen an organization or succession plan. Sometimes it's built in. The vice president becomes the board chair, president after that, or the assistant chair becomes the chair. But make sure there's some kind of transition so you don't have a leadership vacuum. That when the president's term is over, you don't have someone who hasn't been around and seen the ropes. So you just figure out how to make sure you have continuity of skill and knowledge for that key chair role or president role. This one, the last one, I could go on this one forever, but make sure your board gets onboarding and they get training on a regular basis. And like golly, what Tricia just said, they actually had a lawyer go through the bylaws. What great training. Have somebody go through the bylaws with you, have somebody review the strategic plan, have somebody explain what your committees are and what your charters are. Have somebody help you understand how to step into fundraising training. So now we'll move on to the last one. What does that mean? Evaluate and monitor and evaluate performance. So when you look at that, meet as a board required by your bylaws. If you say you're going to meet quarterly, you do it. If you say you can meet through electronic means, that everybody understands that. But if you say you meet in person, make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're following relevant statutes, law, and policies. What are the 2 policies you're required to have by the IRS? What other policies do you have? Are you following your own policies? The statutes one is interesting. Chapter 3 for Idaho has over 180 statutes tied to the nonprofit world. 180. So I actually used to had them published. I have them upstairs actually. You know, make sure you just whatever we're doing here is in accordance with the statute. I'll give you a simple example of that. Idaho statute requires you to have at least 3 board members. That's the requirement. It requires that you at least have an annual meeting. But just make sure you know what state statutes you should be paying attention to, what your policies are, what laws are. Next one, ensure you carry out a fiduciary responsibility review, like we just talked on this one, review the financial statement. The board needs to review the financial statement. The board members need to know, not just the board finance committee. What does our budget look like? What does our annual financial statement look like? Our tax statements. The Form 990 is a bear. It takes a lot of work to read through it, but board members need to be able to read through it and understand the elements. Make sure the board understands that there's fundraising plans and the board knows what they are and they're participating in them. Make sure the board approves the annual budget. Are you doing those things? Are you evaluating that these things are being done? And do you know what they say? Last one, review and approve the organization's annual goals with metrics, evaluation. Here's what we said we were going to do. Well, what I did in Girl Scouts was once we had a simple strategic plan, I reported out to the board every single Monday where we were against the plan. Here's the 5 work areas we're in. Here's what we said we were going to do by quarter. And every single Monday they got that. Here's where we are against this year's plan. That made that part of the board meeting go pretty quickly. Because every week they got an update. And make sure there's metrics. The organization I'm working with right now, one of the board members said, well, you know, whatever goals the organization comes up with that we review and approve, I want to make sure they're measurable. Make sure you have a way that you say, did they do it? Yes or no? Was it a percentage? What is a number? Was it a date? What was it? Make sure it's specific. Risk management policies, make sure you have some in place. And it depends on your organization. You might not have property. You might not have a lot of equipment, but make sure you, as a board, if you have things that you need to be paying attention to, you do that. Once again, you look at your job is to evaluate just the staff leader, not the rest of the staff. So make sure you do it every year. Make sure you review and give feedback every year. And the last one is look at yourself every year. Make sure you review yourself. Are we doing our job? Do we know what we're supposed to be doing? What are our goals? Are we doing it? How can we get better? So any questions on this one? We've only got a couple minutes left.
I would just throw out for everybody on the call that Idaho Partners for Good has created like a succession plan checklist, a board evaluation tool that you can use, and just reach out to us and let us know if those are things that your organization needs. We'll be glad to provide you a template for those things.
Okay, and then I think that's about it. So I did that pretty quickly, but like I said, what I did is I put together a very specific one. So we went to the resources, leadership and resources, when I had the most bullet points today. But the handout, the leave behind I have says, okay, under each category, your strategy and mission, here's at least 6 tasks tied to that. So you'll get a more thorough look at that. So what are your questions?
Bethany, you want to push that poll up so people can take it while they're thinking about their question?
Yep, I can do that right now. We'll ensure that Maureen's slides and her handout will be included in the follow-up. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you for joining us today. The Nonprofit Success Lab was brought to you by Idaho Partners for Good social enterprise Thrive Together Consulting. Thrive Together provides 3 buckets of consulting services: operations, leadership, and strategy. The Thrive Together consulting services are designed with your team to enhance efficiency, streamline processes, optimize resource allocation, and a percentage of the consulting fees help fund our Idaho Partners for Good work. The next step on the Nonprofit Success Lab is part 2 of Maureen's 4-part weekly series. So we are meeting weekly for Maureen's series. We continue next Thursday, which is the 29th, and it will focus on the right role of a nonprofit director in governing well. If you benefited from today's workshop, then spread the word, invite leaders, especially those who sit on boards.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us today.
I do have one quick question about future sessions. If I can't make it to next week's session, I'll be in North Carolina. Should I register and then I can receive like the recording, or do you, I'm not sure if that would mess up your guys' numbers.
Nope, we want to know that you were able to access the resource, so go ahead and register and you'll get the recording.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks to everybody for participating.
Yep, and if it was helpful, Trisha, please share it with the other board members. That'd be great. And Devin, do the same with your board.
Yeah, and next week, what is the right role of the CEO? I actually lay side by side the specific roles and responsibilities of the board versus the staff. So it really helps people understand what's in your lane, so board members don't unintentionally overreach into staff level activities. Or so the staff doesn't actually unintentionally overreach and exceed their authority to make decisions and take action. So it's a pretty powerful approach to who does what and what are the limits of authority. Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much, Maureen. That was wonderful.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you feel better, Bethany.